Hello. So I wanted to talk about world populations for a minute. So our current world population is sitting at 7.7 billion people. And according to what a lot of people say, that is the most people that we've ever had on Earth. It's certainly more than we had last year, the year before, or 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. And it's been steadily going up. But there have been points where it's gone down. And I wanted to point this out. And so I'm disputing that that's the most we've ever had. Now, we know that during World War II we lost something in the region of half of the world's population, or at least to the people that fought. We lost, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but I believe it was around a billion people that lost their lives. We went from a world population of around 2 billion to a world population of around 1 billion. And then in the 74 years since, we've had a gradual increase, consistent increase, that took us from about 1 billion to about 7.7 billion in the space of 74 years, which is really quite an explosion if you think of it in world terms. I mean, if we go backwards from that, and if we'd assumed another period of no war and no great famines or diseases, 1 billion would have gone to around 100 million 100 years before that. So we're talking about 1850. And then 1750 we would have gone to 10 million. 1650, 1 million. 1550, 100,000. 1450, 10,000. Now I can tell you that that's not how things have worked, because we know that the world population, as at the end of the last cataclysm, 12,500 years ago roughly, was about 28,000 people. So we know that it hasn't been that steady increase. And we know that because we haven't had consistent periods of safety, if you like. We've instead had massive wars, because before World War II we had World War I. Now, yes, we have had Vietnam War, Korean War, Iraq War since then, but they haven't really devastated the world population. A lot of people died, but not like half the world's population. There were, I mean, if you talk about the Boer War and all the various other wars before that, they didn't have that many people die. But we have had things like there was great fires, there were volcanic eruptions, there were the bubonic plague, and we have had other things that have really devastated not just a number. So we're not just saying 100 people died or 5,000 people died. We're talking about a proportion of the world's population. And so these things have happened. And our recorded history has only been reliable for about 500 years. Because before about 500 years ago, we didn't keep track of what year it was. And if you go back earlier than about 1,000 years ago, we didn't even know how old we were. They didn't have birthdays, we didn't have months, we didn't have days of the week. We could say, oh yeah, he died 2 summers ago. You could say that. But you couldn't say he died 2 years ago, because we didn't know. And depending on the part of where you were in the world, you might not even know the season. So if you're in the Arctic, or if you're in the tropical areas, you didn't really have clear seasons. So it was even harder. So it's very difficult to keep track of history before that. Now we do have some records going back to about 5,000 years ago, but only some people kept them. Now the ancient Greeks, we call them ancient Greeks. Greece goes back 40,000 years. The English go back 900,000 years. Spanish 1.2 million. Ethiopians about 3 million, and Chad 7 million. Now, I know that's I've just quickly rattled off some numbers, but it's just to point out that human history is not just a little bit more than what we've got written down. It's thousands of times more. If you consider 500 years is our reliable history, and we're calling 500 years ago ancient history. 5,000 years, certainly ancient history. 5,000 years ago is 1,000th of 7 million years ago, not even 1,000th. And it's a big difference. And we've only got snippets. And we know for a fact that there is technology. And I'm just going to singularly focus on the Egyptian pyramids, the big one, the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, from 50,000 years ago, we cannot build today. We can't get close to building even one brick of it. Sure, we could cut something around about that size. We couldn't cut it and place it as precisely as that. Not with 1 million people, not with cranes, not with anything. We have no hope of doing that. We do not have the technology to do it. We certainly don't have the technology to build something that would survive for 50,000 years. And it's probably going to survive for another 1 million years. We have the technology today to build houses that survive anywhere from about 20 years to perhaps 200 years. 200 years is a much smaller number than 50,000. Sure, it is possible we've got a few things that they've been maintained a few times and they're 500 years old, even 1,000 years old, and we've got buildings that old. We do not have the technology today to build something that will last 50,000 years or anything close to that. So we have buildings out there. Now the 50,000-year-old pyramids are the oldest, but we have other buildings out there that are 10,000 years old, that are 15,000 years old, and we do not have the technology to build them. Göbekli Tepe, for example, the one in Turkey, can never say it right, that's around about 14,000 years old, and we don't have the technology to build something like that today. So there's hundreds of these things all around the world that show advanced technology that we do not have today. So I just need to drum that into everybody. Sure, they might not have had mobile phones, and we have no evidence. We have no evidence that they had mobile phones. But we know if I drop my mobile phone on the floor today, it would disappear 50, 100 years. There'd be nothing left. And that's without anyone deliberately destroying it. And we know that our houses, sure, they'll be destroyed in 200 years. In 1,000 years, there'll be nothing left. So if we're talking about anything older than that, unless it was built to be sturdy, such as the pyramids were, it would be destroyed. So we have no idea. We know the pyramids could be used as a power generator to generate mobile electricity. We don't know that they were, but we know they could be today. We could today hook them up and make power out of them. We know that. And we know that could have been what they were doing. We also know they could be used as a Wi-Fi generator and as a phone conductor. You can do all that with pyramids. You can, with the ones that we've got there now. So we don't know that they may have had that technology. They may have had some other technology that's different to that, but just as powerful or more powerful. We don't know because it's destroyed. We have this arrogant assumption that just because we've grown in a population in the last 10,000 years or so, that therefore we never did before. And we don't know that. Sure, we know that, there were times when it went down and times when it went up, but we could have easily had the same population, a similar population, and even a larger population before the last great cataclysm. We could have easily had it. We know that we've been able to fit 3 billion people inside 2 countries as small as India and China. And we know that if we did that worldwide, in every country to make every country as populated as that, we could have 50 billion people in the world. So we know it's possible. Now, they might not have very much resources to go around, but we know that we could do that. And we know that with the world life expectancy of 80 right now, we know that if population is causing that, then we could do better than that. So, yeah, so, I mean, I've estimated some populations, and I've said this, and I believe that the population of Africa, most of which was in northern Africa, as at the time of the Great Cataclysm, was 10 billion, and the population of Europe was 4 billion, and everywhere else combined was 1 billion. And that I think that we've sort of forgotten just how many people were in Africa, how powerful they were, how rich they were. And, you know, just because they're poor now, we assume that they've always been poor, and that's just not the case. Even after the Cataclysm, we know how rich Egypt was, and yet we've pretended, and we know that they were all rich. Just because there was nobody in North or South America doesn't mean that we couldn't have had a big population overall. And there was nobody in North America or South America. They first moved there after the Great Cataclysm. But there wasn't that many people in Asia either. Most of them moved after the Cataclysm. There were a few people. There were some in China, some in India, and even a few in Japan, and other countries as well along the way. But it wasn't heavily populated. And not like today. There were certainly less people in China then than there are now. And we know that. But there were more people in Egypt. There were more people in Ethiopia. There were more people in Libya. There were more people in what is now called the Middle East. There were more people in England. So, and when I'm saying more, I mean 10 times more. England, of course, what, 3/4 of what is now of England is now underwater. You know, it's called the Doggerland. You can look it up. Type in Doggerland, have a look, and you'll see just how big that area was, and that it was connected to France. There was no water in between. That water, the British Channel, English Channel, was created from the Great Cataclysm. Ireland and England were the same country. France was the same country. All that stuff happened afterwards. They're one country. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we're not talking about, and we pretend that we're so big. We've got so many people here. We're so advanced, and we ignore millions of years of history just because we don't know exactly what happened. We pretend that nothing happened. That's just a stupidity. So anyway, that's my talk for today. So bye bye.